BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The Supreme Court in Mexico has decriminalised abortion throughout the country. In a post on social media, it said the denial of the possibility of a termination was a violation of women's rights. Here's Tom Bailey.
The Supreme Court's sweeping decision to decriminalise abortion saw it rule that the current ban on the procedure was unconstitutional and violated women's rights. It comes amid a trend across Latin America in recent years of loosening abortion restrictions that's been referred to as a green wave. Wednesday's ruling has been welcomed by women's rights groups but is likely to anger Mexico's more conservative politicians and the Catholic Church in what is Latin America's second largest Catholic nation.
The United States has announced another $1 billion worth of aid for Ukraine. It includes $175 million in military assistance. More air defence equipment has been promised, along with anti-tank weapons and depleted uranium ammunition for US-made Abrams tanks. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken hailed what he called the important progress that he said Ukrainian forces have been making in their counter-offensive against Russian troops.
Almost exactly 1 year ago, Ukrainian forces have taken back more than 50% of the territory seized by Russian forces since February of 2022. In the ongoing counteroffensive, progress has accelerated in the past few weeks. This new assistance will help sustain it and build further momentum.
More than a dozen people are now known to have died as a result of torrential rains which have been sweeping Greece, Turkey and Bulgaria since Monday. In Greece, some regions received up to 800 millimetres of rain, more than normally seen in a year. The number of tourists killed in flash flooding at a campsite in Turkey has been rising. At least 31 people are now known to have been killed in some of the worst floods ever seen in southern Brazil. In the state of Rio Grande do Sul, rescuers say they're still trying to reach families stranded on rooftops by rising waters. The state governor said it was the deadliest weather-related event in the region's history. Here's our South America correspondent, Katie Watson.
The small town of Mucum was one of the focal points of the flooding. 85% of the town was flooded, and there's fears that the death toll could rise. Now, this isn't the first major flooding in Brazil this year. Back in February, around 50 people died here in the state of Sao Paulo because of extreme rain and landslides. Now, experts are saying that the El Niño weather phenomenon has made things much worse.
World News from the BBC. A US federal judge has ordered the state of Texas to remove floating barriers along a stretch of the Rio Grande River, aimed at preventing migrants entering the country from Mexico. The barrier was announced by the Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, in June. The US Special Counsel investigating President Biden's son, Hunter, says he will seek an indictment by the end of this month. It's not clear what charges David Weiss plans to file against Hunter Biden. A planned plea bargain to resolve tax and gun charges faced by the president's son fell apart in July. Sean Dilley reports from Washington.
Hunter Biden had hoped this case would have been resolved before now. He had reached a deal with prosecutors in Delaware to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax fraud charges. In exchange, he'd enter into a diversion deal that would see him escape possible prison time and a felony firearms conviction for lying about his drug use on a gun application form. The arrangement had been heavily criticised by Donald Trump supporters, who saw it as too lenient. The tax fraud case, which was theoretically unrelated, fell over when the judge in that case questioned the plea deal's legality and the extent of immunity it would have offered Mr. Biden against other charges.
An election tribunal in Nigeria has rejected both petitions brought by 2 presidential candidates in February's poll. President Bola Tinubu's victory had been challenged by his 2 main opponents, Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi. But in separate rulings, the judge rejected their claims. A baby grand piano that the late Queen star Freddie Mercury used to compose some of the band's greatest hits has sold at auction in London for $2 million. Sotheby's earlier sold his original music manuscript for the song Bohemian Rhapsody for $1.7 million. BBC News.